Peace.
You all.
You're on it.
The shift to gender inclusive. Y'all, y'all, I do y'all. I. You all is very Midwestern. All right, are we set? All right, I would like to call this meeting of the Operations Work Group, September 12th, to order. The first item on the agenda is public input. We received 10 written comments that are attached to the agenda. The full written statements are attached and you can find them there. I'm going to summarize it very quickly. These were all about the wellness policy and the water bottle and water access. And so there were 2 opposed to not having more specific language and guidelines in the wellness policy about water bottle filling stations. 1 in support of the wellness policy, but disappointed that the water bottle filling station installation and placement guidelines that the Healthy Kids Collaborative have advocated for have not been included. 1 in support of the wellness policy and the addition of water bottle filling stations being placed in schools. 3 in support of water bottle filling station installation and placement guidelines being implemented in the wellness policy so that there are clear guidelines for each school in the district. 1 in support of water bottles being used in the classroom and installation of water bottle filling stations in newly constructed buildings or those undergoing major renovations. And 2 in support of specific guidelines on the number and placement of water bottle filling stations. All right, and we have online public appearances next. Jesse, how many do we have? 2. Okay, we have 2 public appearances tonight. For public comment tonight, we will have interpreters for Spanish speakers if needed. If needed, before you start your comment, please let us know if you will need the interpreter. And as you give your comment, please take periodic pauses for interpretation. Extra time will be granted for interpretation.
Para aquellas personas que van a aportar comentarios en español, tenemos interpretación disponible en español. Les pedimos que antes de que comiencen a hablar, nos indiquen si van a necesitar interpretación. También les pedimos que a medida que vayan hablando, vayan tomando pausas para permitir la interpretación de sus comentarios. También se les dará tiempo adicional para dicha interpretación.
Gracias. Okay, Jesse, our first speaker.
First speaker is Sean Coble.
Hi there, good evening, board members. My name is Sean Koval. I'm the Healthy Schools Coordinator for the Healthy Kids Collaborative, a longtime partner of the district. I help Ashley lead the District Wellness Advisory Council. I'm a Madison resident, and next year will be an MMSD parent. I'm appearing again tonight to, with a heavy heart, speak in opposition to the wellness policy due to the fact that it still does not take into account the abundance of community input on a core school health issue, water access. Tonight, we ask that the school board listens to the ample community input collected throughout the last 6 months from over 500 stakeholders and key local partners by proposing an amendment to the draft policy that includes water bottle filling station placement criteria. Last month, around 20 stakeholders appeared at this very work group meeting or submitted written comment asking for more specificity and for the addition of 2 water access provisions. When the board decided to delay the vote to incorporate more community input, we were encouraged. When we read the memo and updated policy language over the weekend, the parents, students, medical advisors, staff, and partners in our coalition were disheartened. Though the water bottle allowance is included there, the accompanying water bottle filling station criteria, a key component selected to ensure equitable access to water across our school buildings, is not. Over the last 6 months, we have participated in a grassroots effort to improve water access in schools via the wellness policy, but beyond water access, this effort has had an important goal: engaging first-time advocates in school board policy work. We'd hoped that by starting small with a universally relatable issue such as water access, that students, parents, and partners having their first experience with this school board would have a positive experience and be encouraged to get involved in future engagement with the district. In the last several days, I've checked in with some of the advocates and heard a rage of disappointment and confusion. Comments I've heard are, I don't understand their opposition. Why are they against this? They supported us. What changed? and what more could we have done? And this is after reading the memo that was issued on Friday. To that question of what more could be done, we engaged over 300 MMSD high schoolers in listening sessions and surveys. 96% of those students expressed their support. A group of MMSD elementary school students wrote the school board letters of support and filmed videos explaining why this was important. 14 organizations have signed on their support via our coalition memo. The American Heart Association, Latino Academy, Madison Public Schools Foundation, Wisconsin Public Health Association, the Madison Water Utility, REAP Food Group, SSM Health, the Urban League, UW School of Medicine and Public Health, UW Health. Over 75 additional Madison residents have signed a petition or sent letters of support. 2 of your own medical advisors have sent letters to the school board and MMSD leaders in support. What more could be done? In our conversation with MMSD staff, we have not heard objections to any of the criteria we have outlined, besides that the legal team views the language as too specific. And in fact, we've heard from the staff that such criteria is achievable and planned moving forward. Other districts have adopted such language with great success. Why not include it to ensure health promotion and health equity around water access in our own district? We ask tonight that you listen to the voices of over 500 residents and stakeholders and propose an amendment to the wellness policy that includes water bottle filling station placement criteria. We ask tonight that you get the answers that we have not been able to get. What are the objections to this criteria, and what can we do to incorporate a version of them in the policy? Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Next is Nicole Lazinski.
Good evening. My name is Nicole Hudzinski. I'm the Advocacy Director for the American Heart Association, and I'm also here to talk about the district wellness policy. The Heart Association is part of the coalition to improve water access in schools. Our goal is to improve health by making the healthy choice, in this case water, the easy choice. As part of our coalition efforts, we have participated in DWAC meetings, spoken with district staff numerous times, met with school board members, and engaged community members, including parents and students in the process. It has been months of work, and sitting here today, like Sean, looking at the language before us, I have to share that we are extremely disappointed. On the one hand, we are happy to see language allowing students to carry water bottles throughout campus. Thank you for including that language. However, the second piece we have been advocating for regarding placement of filling stations in new construction and major renovations is not included. The current policy language simply refers to future building services developed plans. And that language gives me no assurances that filling stations will be included or that best practice placement guidelines, including in or near cafeterias, in or near the gymnasium, and in other high traffic areas, will be adhered to. Some may think that including language like this ties the district to future financial commitments, and I would share that I do not believe that's true. If we were asking you to install water filling stations in existing schools, then yes, absolutely, that would carry a hefty price tag, but that's not what we're asking you to do. Our request focuses on new construction and major renovations, and there are already rules regarding drinking water in schools. Currently, the International Building Code, which schools must comply with, requires educational facilities to have 1 drinking fountain per 100 building occupants. Code also allows for substitution of filling stations or fountain filling station combo units. All we are asking for is for language in the wellness policy to specify that at least half of the water fountains required by code will be water filling stations or combo units. And the cost differential between a drinking fountain and a water filling station, particularly when being done during construction, is nominal. We are literally talking about the difference of a few $1,000s as part of a multi-million-dollar construction project. The other placement guidelines that we are requesting also should not contribute to increased construction costs. If that is your concern, significant cost increases for construction projects, then I would encourage you to request a deeper dive into the numbers, because I do not believe that to be true. In conclusion, thank you for including language around water bottles in the classroom. We ask that you go 1 step further and also include language regarding best practice placement for filling stations. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. That is the end of our public appearances for tonight. I am going to move us on to the approval of the minutes. I have moved to approve the minutes from the Operations Work Group meeting dated August 8th, 2022.
Second.
Second, Nichelle Nichols. Any questions, comments? All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes 6-0. All right, we are going to start.
Should be.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Nikki, I didn't see you on there.
Just one point of order. Is it possible to move the wellness policy out of order to be taken first? Because we have a lot of speakers who are here and people who are watching, and I was wondering if we could take that out of order possibly first, and based on the chair's recommendation.
Okay, I'm gonna guess that the first two items are not gonna take us very long. So if that's okay, we'll just move through the agenda.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. And Maya, I see your hand also.
Yeah, the vote was 7-0. I also
Okay.
voted in favor of it.
Thank you. I apologize. I didn't see you on the screen. Okay, the vote for the to approve the minutes, 7-0. All right, moving to the next item on the agenda, we are going to receive a brief update from Dr. Jenkins on the receipt of monies from the governor. Last week, the governor held a press conference and approved additional one-time funding for school districts around the state. And Dr. Jenkins is going to give us an update on what we know so far about this.
Well, thank you so much, Chair Gomez-Smith. And pretty much like you said, it's very exciting news. The governor came down and made a press conference here in terms of some additional resources coming to the schools, actually through the way of DPI, Department of Public Instruction. He actually ordered for a total of $90 million, $75 million coming to the schools to use to help with teacher retention, shortages, and a whole bunch of other things as it has been opened up to help us with schools recognizing where we are. We really do appreciate that. He also gave $15 million for us to deal with anything around our mental health. So we're very pleased. We have received the dollars, and our district received $2.4 million that we do now have. And we're looking at it as a part of our larger scheme of what we're trying to do short-term and long-term. So we'll come back with how those dollars be exactly used once we've had an opportunity to discuss with you two as the board how we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. Can you just clarify a little bit when you're going to be coming back to us with that piece of information?
Yeah, we're looking at all of the budget. As you know, we have some other recommendations that will be coming back to you, how that play into it, how it doesn't play into it. And the reason that we're coming back talking about it, because right now, as it stands, those dollars could go into our fund balance. And the governor didn't give a stipulation that the dollars had to be spent all in 1 year. In fact, there's a stipulation saying that the dollars could spread over until 26. So for us, that gives us great latitude as we're trying to work through where we are right now. So as when we come back, we will be mentioning those dollars, our recommendations for it, and just having that discussion, which we already scheduled to have on the 19th.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. The next item on our agenda is update on the cash flow borrowing. And I am going to invite our CFO, Ross McPherson, to give us an update on this.
Good evening, everybody. In the materials for this evening, I included a brief memo, which is an annual process we go through that addresses our low point of cash throughout the year. For those unfamiliar, we do a short-term borrowing each year, which represents the point essentially in the early October where we end up being cash poor due to the nature of when our major sources of revenue are received from the state. For reference, I'm speaking specifically about our tax levy and our general aid dollars from the state and through the DPI. Each year we do this borrowing based on our current cash position at year end and how long that cash position can sustain the district until we hit our low cash point. The low cash point is inevitably going to be sometime in October. I don't anticipate that moving anytime soon, But the good news is we are looking at borrowing $50 million again this year, which is the same amount as last year. In previous years, we borrowed more. Some board members might recall that we borrowed a little bit more in fiscal 21 due to some anticipation of planning needs around what would reopening schools look like during that school year. As we all know, we had a couple of soft starts and we thought we were going to reopen first quarter, then second quarter. So there's a lot of uncertainty around our spending for that year. But we do find ourselves in a position now where we're only recommending the offer of sale of $50 million, which we'll bring back on September 28th. We had our ratings call today with Standard & Poor. And right now we are still assigned the highest possible short-term rating of S&P 1+. And we don't anticipate that changing anytime soon. So as I said, we'll bring this back at the regular meeting later this month on the 28th to award the $50 million to the winning bidder. It's likely we're going to incur some additional interest rate charges this year due to the changing of fiscal markets we've been discussing for the referendum borrowing. But we'll do that offer on the morning of the 28th, and we'll bring that live on the 28th for final approval.
Great. Thank you so much, Ross. Are there any questions that board members have about this? And are we clear on the process that we are going through? Board President Muldrow, I see your hand.
Ross, I'm curious, you said we have the highest possible rating in terms of our ability to borrow. What would change or alter that rating?
Changing in our bond rating for short or long term is dependent largely on fund balance position and overall fiscal health. We've shown committed each year putting out a balanced budget and showing significant resources such that the borrowing market sees us as a very low risk investment. So they're more able to give us better rates, better borrowing terms, which we can use to forego some of the interest costs I was referring to earlier.
Ross, when is the last time that our rate was less than perfect?
It has been several years. I don't have the exact year. It might have actually been close to 10 years ago. I think we were at our lowest point, but I don't have that information handy, unfortunately.
Ross, when we talked earlier, you talked about the last time we used fund balance or had, less fund balance at the end of the year than we did at the beginning of a year was about 5 years ago. At that time, did that use of fund balance impact our rating?
Not significantly. We would need to show repeated use of fund balance or significant change in fund balance such that our performance would show a negative trending. We have not demonstrated that in recent times.
Thanks so much, Ross.
Board Member Nichols.
Yes, mine is it's more of a technical question, I believe. In the memo, it says that the note shall be dated October 2023 and shall mature on September 2nd, 2023. And I was just wondering.
That should be October 2022. You are correct. That's a typo.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. We're going to issue the note in this year.
Right. We'll vote on it on September 28th. The note will be October 2022 and then mature the following September, right?
Right. Be payable next September. Correct.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, as Ross indicated, we will be voting on this at the end of the month and he will be getting us the information once that bid comes out at the end of September on the day of our meeting. So more information to come on that. The next item on our agenda is the wellness policy. So we are back to policy 4810 or 4610, sorry. We discussed this policy in our last operations work group. Since then, revisions have been added to the draft that you see attached to board docs. And this took into account the August wellness district advisory meeting, as well as the discussion we had at the operations work group. And I believe Sherry and Ashley and Cindy are joining us to tell us a little bit about the policy revisions and answer any questions that board members may have.
Good evening. I'm going to invite Ashley to join. Oh, there she is. I didn't see her. Hi, Ashley. Okay. And Sherry is not with us this evening. So I'll let Ashley start by just providing an overview of many of the changes that have happened since the last time we were together. And I think we mostly wanted to open it up just for discussion and any last clarifying questions the board may have before we go to vote at the end of the month.
Sounds good. Thank you, Cindy. Hi, Ashley.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Yeah, so Cindy, as you just said, I'll just share some brief overviews that were listed in the memo, but just so that others can hear on this call as well. So things that have changed since the last draft that was submitted took into account the District Wellness Advisory Council feedback, and then the Board of Ed, the Operations Work Group feedback that was shared the last time we met. Some key things, there was some specifics added around high level, like who is responsible for implementation or what does this look like? Just needing more clarification on that. There were some sections that the feedback was that it may not have been measurable or that it needed to be more specific for what does this look like in our schools. So you'll see that in some of the sections like school culture and climate, and in others, it's more specific than maybe it was originally, and things that tie to things that we can measure in our schools. We did add the language around water bottle access in schools. And let's see here. And then there is language that was added around the bottle filling stations. The criteria is not listed in the policy, but it does refer to the filling stations in two parts of the policy, one up by the water access and nutrition, and then another one down in physical environment where it says language around using guidance and procedures and information and procedures to provide guidance for schools on where to place those during new construction and renovated spaces. And then just one small update, when I did run this policy through the WellSat tool, which measures the strength, the draft that was presented on 8/8, the score was 95 for comprehensiveness and strength 66. And this time around now it is 98 for comprehensive and 60. Oh, I messed this one up. I think it's, here, hold on. I'm sorry. It's 64 okay, I'll get back to you on that. They both went up. The memo that I'm reading from right now, I think is not accurate. But both of the strength and the comprehensiveness have gone up since the last draft that we brought to the board. Sorry about that.
I will just add one additional thing, and then Chris, I will turn it back to you for questions or comments from the board. One of the other things that we tried to be very careful about was to ensure that the policy was not dictating kind of what departments were going to be doing. If you remember, a previous iteration of the policy kind of intertwined policy and procedures and guidance. And so we're trying to, as we're making revisions to our policies, as a system, we're trying to pull out language that is about processes, is about procedures, is about work of departments, and have the policy only be about the specifics of that policy and allow for guidance documentation. So that is one of the additions you will see. And we also tried to be careful about what the policy might have to hold to in terms of any costs and where those costs could live in our guidance documents versus in a policy specifically. So with that, Board Member Gomez-Schmidt, I will turn it back to you for any clarifying questions or anything that the board may have.
All right, thank you, Cindy. And thanks, Ashley, for that explanation. I did take a look at the comprehensiveness and the strength and was curious about the numbers because it did look like the strength went down. And so if that's a correction that needs to be made, but I have a couple of comments that I can make on that later too. Board Member Vandermeulen, I see your hand.
Yes, I don't understand. Well, I do and I don't, on why policy and practice and guidance need to be separated when one leads to the other and how it works. I don't see why it cannot live in the same document as the policy itself is what guides the guidance documents. I think separating the two only leads to confusion. My second comment is, why are we only waiting on new buildings? With significant renovations being done, I don't understand why we couldn't put more specific water filling stations specifically in. I read the memo, but why we couldn't put them specifically in the policy, because it's a specific policy that spells out what should be in there. Policy is supposed to be specific. It's supposed to say what can be done, what can't be done. It's not whether we could guide whether it should be, it's whether or not it can be fiscally done and whether it can be provided. I think this is a chance where we always say we want to hear from our community. We've heard from our community. We've heard from the American Heart Association. We've heard from the Urban League. We've heard from even UW Health. We've heard from our own medical advisors. I don't understand why we wouldn't put that in there. Otherwise, I'm all right with the policy if that's in there. Otherwise, that's something I can't do because I think we need specific language. I'm glad we put the water bottles in, but you've got kids, especially individuals with disabilities, who don't always have the ability to get to water stations quickly, especially during passing time. This is going to directly affect them. And I worry that the lack of water stations will be a further detriment on equity issues, and that worries me. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Board Member Nichols.
Okay, thank you. First of all, let me just start off by saying I so deeply appreciate, I mean, this is in our board docs, the 7th edition. A lot of redlining, a lot of new language added. And so I just want to acknowledge all of the folks who have been working so hard on this policy. And I was happy to see some additional language added in this version that we did not have the last time it came. There are a couple of questions that I do have. So in the section, I think it's section 4, that talks about nutrition services and environment, specifically around school meals. We reference quite a bit in the policy talking about, I think in letter B, when possible, school meals will include fresh, locally grown foods from farms, and talks about practicing good food procurement methods. And all of that sounds really good. My wondering is, there have been a number of emails that have come in as of recently related to the type of food that's being offered. And so my wondering is, do the nutrition standards also talk about maybe a minimum number of calories per child that are kind of included in a meal, not just where the food comes from, but how we're trying to meet kind of a minimum calorie by child developmental, stage or age, as well as a focus on like the mix of foods that might give children a more balanced meal. So that was one question. I can pause there, or I don't know if you want me to keep going with all the questions.
Board Member Nichols, I think if you pause there, I was going to invite Mr. Hodo, and I'm not sure if Josh is on here as well, to see if he has a response specific to that from the food service.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Board Member Nichols. To your specific points, what I will probably end up doing is I put together a brief memo outlining the complexities of the start of the school year. We'll get that out to the board as quickly as possible. I briefed Dr. Jenkins on our first week opening and how it's directly related to staffing issues. And so while we too want a very robust menu, we also recognize that we have some staffing shortages that has severely impacted us. And if for us to get to where you want to go, we have to fix this staffing issue. And so I'm working with our teachers. We're working with our food service operators to ensure that we address this matter as quickly as possible. But to your point, we want what exactly you said. And that's why the language is to the extent, because we need to get staffing levels up to par first.
Okay, so thank you so much, and I'm sorry to hear that we are short-staffed, and that's impacting not only, you know, your department, but also all of the schools. I think I'm more wondering if there's, and maybe this is too specific, but I'm just wondering, when you reference the USDA nutrition standards, do the standards automatically include like a minimum calorie or blend of or balance of food, or is it not that specific?
It's actually that specific. And so we have a weekly balance. It's not a daily, but we have a weekly specific, and then I'm quite sure we can get those regulations to you based upon current USDA standards.
Okay, got it. Thank you. So right now, there would be, you know, if all things, we had all the staffing that we needed and all the resources were kind of in place, fulfilling this aspect of the policy would not be problematic.
Currently, we're providing reimbursable meals consistent with the USDA standard. We're meeting nutritional value.
Okay.
It is the minimum level. Our goal is to begin an uptick on more robust menu items as quickly as possible. As soon as we get it in the supply chain, we're getting them out to the school as quickly as possible. The complexity of certain foods require a different skill set than prepackaged. But ultimately, yes, we are an aggressive approach to get where we got to go. And you should see some upcoming changes over the next 2 weeks as we get in school. Also, keep in mind, we have numerous other school districts who are also ordering some of the same similar items, and we're seeing some shortages across the board. But we are ready to pivot and adjust as soon as we get these into our supply chain.
Okay, thank you for reframing that you are meeting the minimum, but we want to be able to do more than that.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to move on to my next question. So this is specifically about the drinking water access. Really happy to see that additional language was added around students and staff being able to carry approved water bottles. And I think to the comments and the letters and that we've received, I'm going similarly to the same question that Board Member Vandermeulen asked, which is, with the specificity around placement of the filling stations being near cafeterias, gymnasiums, that language that talks about where they're placed, how come, just tell us why you probably leaned not in a direction of including that level of specificity, because it does seem like it would matter. When I go back to, I'm holding up emails and letters that were handed to us at a board meeting not long ago. You know, there are students saying when there's only one water bottle filler, there's a huge line. And so as much as I appreciate that we're gonna include that in new construction, I'm just curious why we also didn't include the language around placement of those and potentially increasing.
So I am going to see if Ashley wants to first answer that, and if Mr. Hodo wants to come back on to speak to that more. One thing that I just want to clarify is that we have more than one water filling station in the schools, and the use of the water bottles we also thought was an important add to ensure that students could have that in classroom and carry that with them, you know, throughout the day, wherever they roam. But I'll see if Ashley or Mr. Hodo want to add any more specificity to that.
Yeah, I would just add that, so the language of that specific criteria will be in the procedures document, which we're still working to finalize, and we'll share with the the board or whomever with public as far as the specific areas of the policy around procedures. So those will be listed, those exact specifications or criteria will be listed. And there was one other piece that I was going to share. Yeah, so they're in there, and it's referenced twice in the policy. It says, let's see here. So in accordance with building services, develop plans for such filling stations. And then down below in the physical environment section, it says will provide guidance in the considered injunction with the building services plan, centering health and well-being in those spaces. And then it says specifically for water stations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Board Member Nichols, I can probably add a little bit of more depth to it. Presently, as you know, we're meeting the minimum capacity of 100 occupants per water station. When we selected the water stations across the spectrum of all schools, we try to strategically place them where they're equal walking distance all across every school. One of the things that we run into is, in some cases, these new water bottle stations require electricity and they require already additional plumbing. In a lot of cases, at our older schools, there's additional plumbing that has to be done to retrofit, clean out some of those lines. Is a cost factor. We do recognize and we agree with Sean, and we have went back and forth, and we totally agree that we should add more as these water bottlers come online. They are between 6 months to a year in advance purchase. And so as we get them in, we will continue the process of going below the threshold of 1 per 100. But right now we are meeting the minimum goal. We put in an investment of close to $750,000, which the board has supported us with. We're extremely happy with the progress. We can do more, yes. As our budget allows, we'll continue to go down that road of adding water bottle stations closer to gym proximity and where kids are gathered.
Thank you so much. And Cindy, and Ashley, I just wanted to say that I was positively acknowledging.
Hold on 1 second. There's an echo. You gotta mute.
That I was positively acknowledging the new language that said students and staff can bring water bottles throughout the building with them and into class. So I was really happy to see that. That was a distinct question that has been raised in our public comment tonight, as well as in previous letters. So I just appreciate hearing again why some of the specificity about the placement of the water filling stations wasn't included in this version. So thank you for that. Okay, a couple more questions. You added some language on fundraising and said that fundraisers involving food and beverages taking place on the school campus during the school day will meet or exceed USDA Smart Snacks in school nutrition standards. My question is, and this is more of a procedure, but I'm curious how you think that might impact student clubs, PTOs, and athletic booster clubs, who oftentimes are doing fundraising on school grounds in order to meet additional or create additional opportunities.
Cindy, you want me to jump in? Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. Yeah. So first off, this policy section is pretty vague because acknowledging the complexities of this. The policy specifically is for during the school day. And the intention is that with USDA encouragement is that when you're selling food, let's say like you're doing a candy bar sale for something, that you're not having the food be consumed throughout the school day, meaning that it's during the school day that we're not offering things that wouldn't meet Smart Snacks, wouldn't meet those nutrition requirements from the USDA to take place. So for instance, the last time the policy went through in 2018, I know Steve Youngbauer would be working with different people that run school stores at the high school levels to make sure that what's being sold at those, if they are selling things, meet the smart snacks requirements. You mentioned like PTOs or even athletics, like that's where, if it's after school hours, that this policy doesn't, for what the language that we're putting in, the policy is just during the school day. And I think more will be explained and ironed out in the procedures around what this looks like. The main goal here is saying that when we're hosting fundraisers during the school day, that we're ensuring that if they are anything to do with food, that they meet those smart snacks requirements if people are consuming them. There's some other things where it's like, if you sign up for a bucket of cookie dough or something, and it's not actually being consumed in the school day, then that's a little bit different than specifically during the school day. And then to add to that is that DPI does allow for some exemptions. And so that's again needing to be ironed out as far as the procedure. So the current language, I think with DPI is saying like 2 exemptions per student organization or some type of club. So those details would be ironed out in the procedures to make sure that we can all be on the same page. But the real goal is just to ensure that if we are offering or selling or providing food during a fundraiser specifically, that we're thinking about making it smart snacks approved, and or trying to think about other ways to fundraise other than through foods and cakes, cookies, things like that, but like thinking about other things that we could maybe offer instead that more so promote health and well-being.
Thank you. I think my eyes were more focused on the school campus part than the school day part. So thank you, Ashley, for that distinction. Okay, then related to a section in the policy that's number 7, health services. We have in here that the district will ensure that all students 4K through 12 have access to health services in the school setting delivered by highly qualified nurses or advanced practice nurse providers. So I guess what I'm wondering here is, since this is part of policy language, when we have vacancies and are not able to ensure that all students have access to health services through a nurse or an advanced practice nurse provider, I guess I'm just wondering, should that be the policy language? Because this is specific. It doesn't say have access to health services in the school setting, period. It's saying specifically who it's delivered by. And because we know that there's been so many types of staffing shortages, we just heard from Mr. Hodo about even how food services is short-staffed. I imagine we also have shortages with nurses or advanced practice nurse providers. So I was just wondering if there's an unintended consequence of including that specificity in the policy. Or if not, I would love to hear your thinking about why to keep it in.
Thank you for that. I am going to see if Nurse Carrie is on here. If not, I will turn it to Dr. Esser to be able to provide an answer for you.
Hi, all. So that's a great question, Nichelle. We purposely kept that in because we do feel it's important that every school has access to a nurse, even in times when staffing is either short or running low, that every school should be assigned or have access to a school nurse. So in times when our staffing is short, it's typically either covered by central office nurses that are covering for our schools, or through long-term sub positions with our nurses. So I, despite struggling with staffing shortages as well, feel it is imperative that every school has access to a nurse. And then the additional statement that follows that, I believe, has in to be covered by health services staff, which would be a nurse or a nursing assistant, I believe.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. So Nurse Carrie, you would say keep it in there because it's an important part of the health service offering under the wellness policy.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And then my last question is, now this is not in the actual policy piece. It was in the memo that accompanied the policy. In the memo, we kind of start in the opening that wellness policies serve as a targeted universal strategy for school districts, staff, families, and community organizations to work together collaboratively to better align systems, policies, and practices to create healthier schools. And I'm wondering if you can speak to how is this policy a targeted universal strategy?
Ashley, you want to take a stab and then I'll follow up?
Yeah. So the wellness policy is modeled after the WISC model, which is the CDC's and the ASCD's model for supporting the whole child. And the idea of the different components, which our policy is outlined, the different components in the policy are the universal that all students should have access to, meaning that it's a universal strategy that if we operate this way, all students will have access to X, Y, and Z. If we say that all snacks have to be USDA Smart Snacks approved, then we know that across the district that all students, if we provide snacks to students, that they will meet that requirement. If we say that all students will have access to health education, that is the universal targeted strategy. And then when you go up from there, like each of these different components have tiered levels of support that may be in addition to what that universal strategy is. For instance, the health services, like all students have access to health services. Some students may have coordinated care plans, and I may not be saying it exactly right, Carrie, with your language, but like there may be different levels of support that may be offered. But the whole idea is that this policy, that these supports or these strategies help provide that universal piece for all students to have healthier schools and healthier environments when they're at school, and therefore healthier environments tied to higher academic achievement.
Thank you for describing that. So what I'm hearing you say is there are some universal goals around wellness, many of which are outlined in the policy by category. And then within that category, there are targeted and differentiated supports that help the children and the young folks who may not have the most access to be able to access aspects of this health and wellness, right?
Yeah, and I would also say it's also the idea of like even us coming together as a district to create this policy with the community, with different stakeholders, the idea that it's coordinated in a sense that like we know where different supports are and that it's clear and kind of can function the best it can to make sure that students have access to what they need.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate you.
And Ashley, I just wanted to clarify too that it's a to me, Board Member Nichols, it seems like a targeted universal strategy just by the fact that we're required to have a policy by USDA, right? So that's a requirement of the district and of every district to have a policy, I think.
Yeah, the only reason I appreciate that, Board Member Gomez Schmidt, you know, targeted universalism it's a very distinct type of policy work, particularly around equity. And so I just wanted to hear how the staff were describing it so that I could understand exactly how it was being applied.
Thank you for asking that question.
Mhm.
Board Member Vandermeulen, I see your hand.
Yes, two things. One observation, one question. The question is, so what you're saying is you expect the board to vote on a policy while you write how the policy will be used after the fact, and the board has no say whatsoever on that? Is that what I'm hearing?
Can I clarify, please? We have the policy written. What Ashley mentioned that we are still in draft and working through a kind of collaborative approach is the guidance in terms of what that would look like at the school level, at the district level, at the department levels, in terms of how you operationalize the policy. But the policy would stay as it is written. The guidance that we would work on would be happening, continuing to happen, because we have it in draft right now, just to clarify, two different sets of documents.
How can you guide a policy if the board doesn't know what's going to be guided? How can you vote on a policy if you don't know how it's going to be used, how it's going to affect, how it's going to be put into process? It defeats the entire purpose of the policy, because very simply, you could state it only applies to, say, people only on Wednesdays in the guidance, which would nullify the entire policy completely, put it entirely in the guidance document with absolutely no way to reconcile that.
So I'm not sure that is how the guidance would work, or how guidance or procedures work for any other policies that we write. We would use the policy as our guidepost to develop the procedures around. We would not be changing policy. We would keep the policy as it stands. This is definitely something that happens often, where a policy is drafted and then we work directly with our schools, with our leaders, with other staff, as well as central office, to develop a really clear procedural manual to support how you operationalize the policy.
Do you work with the board directly on the guidance, and can you?
Normally, we do not work with the board on guidance. We work with the board on policy.
And I can just give a small example. So the parts about recess, so policy versus what would be in the procedure is the policy part is that all elementary students will receive 30 minutes of recess per day on regular scheduled days. How that looks, the procedure could be things as far as like scheduling, as far as guidance, or what that looks like as far as active recess, and goes into more details. The policy piece is the piece that's not going to change, and is the fact that all students will have access to the 30 minutes.
However, according to the statute, the powers of the, I have one more question, but besides this, may I just ask this one as well? Christina?
Yeah, yes, we do. And I think, and then I want to make a statement, just I think that I can provide a little clarity around this process too, but go ahead.
Okay, this one other. It's just what I'm worried about is our statute says that the board has the right to be involved in all parts of the education system, as long as it doesn't violate federal or state law in section 118, and it is reasonable. Also section 118, I believe it's 118, it could be 120. I do not have it in front. My question is, does this take it away? And that I don't need an answer to now. The one I would like an answer to that is a question is the following. Why are we being more specific on the amount of calories on USDA in the policy, the nursing part of what's in the policy, but we can't be specific on how much water is available to our children?
All right, so I'm trying to think your first part of the question was more around the procedures. The other thing that I'll just say is that part of the wellness policy requirements by USDA is that there is this continuous group of stakeholders coming together to create things. So to talk about the procedures wouldn't be created in a box, but also be within internal groups, and then we're reaching back out to the District Wellness Advisory Council and other subcommittees to continuously get input and transparency of those procedures. So as those are created, it's definitely something that is we want to continue to include stakeholder input and voice in that process.
Thank you.
And then
Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
in your second questions to the specifics, as far as the standards go, the USDA has specific requirements for this policy. And one of them is that if you participate in the federal lunch program, the school lunch program, that you must have USDA, you must serve USDA or you must meet the requirements. And therefore, so there's certain parts of this policy that are very explicit because they have to be legally to be able to participate in that, in the lunch program. And for instance, like the water is not, that's not a requirement. Actually, the parts that we do have in there are above and beyond what the minimum requirements are for water access. And then that's why, again, even with the health services category, we didn't be specific on certain things because we wanted to keep it somewhat broad because there's not specific requirements by the USDA for that language.
Thank you.
Okay. Board Member Vandermeulen, you all can't see me on the screen. I got bounced out of Zoom and I connected back in. But I just wanted to clarify that as we are working through the update and the process we are going to do comprehensively to update our policies, part of the sort of messy thing we need to figure out is what is going to be written into policy and what is going to live in administrative guidance. Right now, when we have a lot of administrative guidance that couples with our policies, it is in all different places and it depends on what the policy is, what the department is. Thank you, Dr. G. What the topic of the policy is, what department's in charge, and it is really hard to know where to find that guidance and where people can really understand what the guidance is that connects the policy to the practices in the schools. And so one of the things that we're going to be working through, and we'll even be talking about this later when we talk about the cell phone policy, this came up in another policy that we were discussing recently, is that we're going to have to figure out eventually our policies, our suite of policies at the board level are going to have a set of administrative guidelines that match, that show how the policies get implemented through procedure. But it is going to be a serious work in progress to get that all together and have it be a comprehensive thing that the public can access and that the schools can access and that everybody knows where that lives. And so Nikki, I understand your question that if we take things out of policy, where do we find it and where do we know that it is actually going to be implemented if the language isn't in the policy? So I think that's what I hear that you're asking. Is that accurate?
That is what I'm partially, and that's partially what I'm asking. Partially, I am requesting that on guidance that it come back to the board because there's no point in writing policy if you can't discuss how that policy is going to be implemented.
Right, and I think that will be a discussion for the pieces where we're rewriting policies, where those procedural guidances at how they're currently written in board policy get moved into administrative guidelines, and which we decide for each policy need to stay because they're general enough that we actually need them to lead towards those administrative guidelines. Does that make sense?
Now it does. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Board Member Pearson, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment, just kind of one-upping what Nichelle and Nikki also mentioned about just the filling stations. And I think more so, I think Nikki made the point of why are we only including the new buildings and not all the buildings to have those touchless water bottle filling stations. I don't think I've heard an answer to that exactly yet. And maybe it was just a comment by Nikki, but I'd just like an answer to that.
I can ask Mr. Hodo to come back on. I know many of our current buildings, not just new spaces, do have the touchless water, but I'll let Mr. Hodo answer that more specifically.
Yeah, thank you, Cindy. Amaya, for your vantage point, from the programming side and planning side, building services for long-range plannings is trying to begin to budget that piece. Provide a cost analysis moving forward to retrofit all existing water stations. And so for us, it just simply boils down to getting it planned out and be a part of our capital planning. I'll certainly coordinate with Ross. I'll work with my team to get a preliminary budget of what it will cost to retrofit all water stations across the district, if that's what you all would like to do. I think the initial directive was to ensure that we have ample amount of water per 100 occupants. We hit that benchmark. We'll continue to try to improve it moving forward. To your question specifically, there are some water stations that does not have electricity. And so that is a different level, and it will require planning to ensure that if we use the water bottle station, we must run electrical lines over the area. We must ensure the plumbing is succinct as well. And so that requires some demo, some construction, et cetera. And there's a cost attached to that.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. Yeah, I understand that. And I think, as we are thinking about the future of our schools and thinking about how we can go into the new age, and some might think that some of our schools are kind of pretty outdated to the point where, yeah. So I wanted to ask that because I do think it's important, when my kid is like, hey, I only have 3 minutes to get to my class, right? And at the water fountain, everyone is there and everyone's trying to fill up their water bottles. Just with the regular water fountains, there's not enough time to do that. And then, you come back and then it's not enough time and the cycle continues. But the touchless ones do offer a more quick fill up, and it's just a lot easier, especially when it comes to just accessibility. So yeah, if we can figure out how we can do that and invest in that, I think it is important. And I think it is a move to kind of signal that, we are trying to get ourselves and our schools into the future. I know some of our schools are really, really old. And as you mentioned, there are just some logistical pieces, but I think most of the board or most of my colleagues are pretty committed to ensuring the access to water. Water is life. And so, yeah, the more that we can make sure that happens once, and I don't know if that requires necessarily a policy change later. And I don't know if Sherry's on here or not, because I feel like just saying, only our new buildings will have this. It doesn't hold us accountable as a district then to say that all of our schools will have this. So I don't know what the logistics would be around that, but I don't know if I don't see Sherry on the Zoom yet, or if she's here to kind of just say like, will we have to revisit this policy again to update it once you get the numbers, Mr. Hodo, with Ross, or if it's going to be something that we can change now and just in retrospect for the future. So.
Well, I'll certainly gather my team. I know Savetlin and Alyssa, who's overseeing the project, is online today. If they want to add any comment right fast, briefly, I certainly encourage them, but I think they hear you loud and clear. We hear you loud and clear, and we'll certainly do what we can. But I don't know if any Savetlin or Alyssa is on it, but they would like to make a comment.
Oh, it was more so just a policy issue, policy question of how it's written, because right now the way it's written is very specific to new schools. It doesn't necessarily put in there that we are looking then to retrofit all of our schools, including our new schools. So that language to me is a little just like, if we decided not to, then there's no, I guess, accountability measure on our part to ensure that happens. That makes sense.
Yeah, Board Member Pearson, Sherry is not with us tonight, but we can circle back with Sherry and Cedric's team and discuss exactly what you're bringing up, and make sure we get back to you prior to the 28th when the board will be voting on this.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. And then just my last comment is just, as we are looking to update our policies pretty frequently, I know that this board has been tasked, and one of our goals is to try to not wait 10, 20 years to update policies. So just looking forward of how we can make that more efficient and kind of make our policies more efficient around that. So we're not necessarily like we're looking towards the future, but not just only in the now. So thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Pearson. Any other questions or comments?
Mine is just a comment.
Okay, yes, Board Member Nichols.
I do just want to make sure that Ashley, thank you for your leadership on this. Thank you for, creating the space for all of the collaboration with our community organizations. Thank you to the parents and the family members and the students who have sent in comments about how important water is to them. I've never seen water be so popular in my whole life. It's a beautiful thing. But just deep appreciations for all of the hard work on this policy. And even though it may be a requirement in order for us to participate in the USDA food school program, this policy is really comprehensive. And it may not have everything that folks are looking for exactly to the T, but I think it paints a very comprehensive and strong commitment from our district to really promote wellness for students and for staff. So I just want to say thank you all for the hard work.
All right, Dr. Jenkins, before you wrap us up, I'm just gonna add myself to the queue on this. I just have a couple of questions and comments. I also, like Nichelle, want to echo just thanks to everyone who has participated in this process, and just really impressed that you all have gotten us to a comprehensiveness of a 95 rating on this policy, which is super high. And just the fact that you did go back after the District Wellness Advisory Council met that last time and after you received feedback, and there are quite a few changes in here. I really appreciate the language around the students being able and staff being able to carry water bottles, the addition of the language around adding the water bottle filling stations for new and major renovations. I understand the concern about maybe the ratios or percentages of filling stations not getting added. If there's any way to add any flexible language in there that doesn't commit us to a number, but again, gets a little closer, I'd be interested in that by the end of the month. I don't know what that is off the top of my head. But I'm also, so just thank you for that. As you've heard from many board members, I think this board is very supportive. I, as a board member, am very supportive of the access to water issue and in continuing to move us forward on this. And like board member Pearson highlighted, making sure that it's not just new and major renovations, but trying to figure out a process going forward to including all of our schools in that. I had a question around, in addition to that, again, it was around the strength of the policy decreasing from a 65 to a 62. And if it actually went up from a 62 to a 65, that's fine. But I'm sort of curious, we did add a lot of language that says may and to the extent possible and things like that. I am wondering if there's any way to just take another look through it and if there's ways to add shall instead of the mays, and to strengthen it a little bit more in that way, not to commit us to anything that we're not able to do, but just again to, having a 60 whatever rating for strength, there's something that we're doing with the language around that. So just curious as if we could take one more pass through that and take a quick look before we come to a vote at the end of the month. Nikki, I see your hand and I'm almost done. And I guess that was, I had one more question. Let me see. It was about the school recess, about some language that got added. And I just wanted to know, I'm trying to find it here. It was about the physical activity being not limited to recess and other things not being withheld as punishment. But I'm curious about the last line that got added. Schools are encouraged to use physical activity as a reward. I'm not sure about the reward and punishment thing, but balancing each other out. I'm just curious to why that got added, and maybe Ashley, you can explain that a little more.
Yeah, so that section got updated to take a lot of the language from our last policy based on feedback from people in the District Wellness Advisory Council saying that they liked that specific language that we had before. Some of that is highly recommended by the USDA. So maybe that feels like it's combining two different topics into one section. So maybe that's where I'll have to see if there's a different place, but there's certain, as far as the strength of the policy, if you talk about that, like, you know, we're not using physical activity as a, whether you say punishment or like a behavioral response. But then and the other side of that is recommended that there's policy that does say that we encourage physical activity as a reward, meaning that, like, let's say you get so many of these, I don't know, hootie holler bucks or something like that at your school. And then you're thinking about how now you're using how many, like a PBIS kind of type thing is what I meant to say. Like, and then you get to participate in rent a bouncy house or something, that you're promoting physical activity as a reward, not thinking of rewards as food, ice cream, like things like that, but like thinking specifically about how you increase the amount of physical activity that you're using it as a reward, or like an extra recess, let's say, or something like that, to partake in. So maybe it's where it's placed. I believe it was in the first draft also, but it may have been in a different section. So I can take a look at that to see if there needs to be like more clarity of where that falls.
Okay. Yeah, I guess just the way it read, I guess my question was, is it a best practice to use physical activity as a reward? And does that end up promoting more kids doing more physical activity? I guess that was sort of my question around that. Yeah, if you could take a look at that language, that would be great. Board Member Vandermillen, you had one more comment or question? I think you're.
I was trying to get unmuted. Just remember, shall is must in law, may is can. So if you put shall, it means we're ordered to do it legally. The way the statutes read, shall is considered must in law, may is considered can. Therefore, if you change it to shall, it means they have no choice.
Okay, so it leaves us more flexibility to have the may language in there.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
It's the most confusing legal language, but that's the reason why I'm doing it. As for your other question, I could actually explain part of it. With the special ed, often recess was taken away as a punishment for especially on special ed kids for misbehavior, not sitting in their seats. So they're trying to use it now as a reward instead of a punishment to undo the number of years that people used it as punishment based.
All right, thank you. Well, with that, we will wrap up this policy discussion. If board members, if you have any other questions or suggestions or comments, feel free to send those to Ashley, send those to me or to Sherry before the end of the month. This will be coming back at our regular board meeting for a vote at the end of the month. All right. We are moving on to oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Jenkins. I'm sorry, I forgot about you. You put your hand down and I lost track of you there. So you wanted to wrap us up on this topic.
Yeah, I think Board Member Pearson probably had one too. Did I see her hand go up?
Yeah, I just had a quick question, Chris. Are we gonna get the updated one in our briefings for the 28th or 29th, whatever day?
I do not know if it will be in the briefings. It will for sure be in the packet for that.
Okay.
The meeting at the end of the month. Would you like it to be sooner if it's possible to get it for briefings?
No, it's fine. I just was wondering. That's it.
Okay, thank you. All right, Dr. Jenkins.
Okay, I'm just gonna close it up. I tell you, this is one of the best policy discussion I think we've had. And this shows the seriousness of this board, this community, our students. Sean, I want to say thank you, Ashley, and also to Cindy and Ms. Cedric Hodo as well. The way that you all responded, and Nurse Carey, this was really robust, and I think that we are on our way to doing something really, really well for our district. This is strategic framework goal number 2, and trying to make sure that we have all of our students, all of our staff, all of our parents, everybody experience our district in a very thriving way. So I just wanted to thank everybody for the intensity behind this discussion and the intentionality behind this discussion. And I just wanted to say to Board Member Gomez-Smith and the rest of the board members, in our long-range facility plans, it is too what Board Member Pearson asked. We're looking to make sure that this is a part of it and getting us to our overall vision of 2040 to have all of our buildings over very healthy like this, particularly when it comes around war. So thank you for this discussion.
Great, thank you, Dr. Jenkins. And with that, that sort of is a perfect transition into our next discussion on facilities. And Mr. Hodo and his team are going to be joining us for a discussion or an update actually on the referendum facilities construction. Welcome,
Absolutely.
Mr. Hodo.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Committee Chair Gomez-Smith. Alyssa, if you can help us drive the slides, I appreciate it. Thank you all. First of all, good evening to the entire Board of Education members, Dr. Jenkins, Committee Chair Gomez-Smith, to our colleagues and community members. Thank you for this opportunity to present, just to provide you an update on the referendum and our 2020 progress thus far. Next slide. As always, we anchor everything that we do in our 3 goals. Every child is on track to graduate ready for college, career, and community. The district and every school in it is a place where children, staff, and families thrive. And of course, goal 3, African-American children and youth excel in school. Next slide. The district's mission and vision: to achieve MMSD's graduate vision and strategic framework goals, we work collaboratively to ensure all students have access to high quality, equitable, inclusive instruction and services leading to deep learning and resulting in college, career, and community readiness. Next slide. Building Services mission statement. The mission of Building Services is to effectively manage, maintain, and upgrade the building and grounds of the Madison Metropolitan School District in order to provide the highest quality, energy-efficient environment for education. Next slide. Today's referendum we brought to you on behalf of the entire team, and specific myself, Sabetlin Borsoff, Peter Sandin, and Jordan Schultz. Aaron, unfortunately or fortunately, is actually on vacation. So I want to thank, first of all, Peter, our senior project manager from Findorf, to supporting this particular presentation. Again, thank you, Peter. Next slide. What you'll see today, we'll talk about a summer work overview. We'll talk about La Follette's progress. Peter also bringing you memorials, East, West, South Side, and Capitol High. Just a quick update with some images, our most important things, what we did over the summer. Keep in mind, we had roughly 8 to 10 weeks to get this thing turned around, and we've made significant progress. And we are extremely happy with what we've done over the last couple of weeks. So in addition to that, we'll talk about lessons learned. And what does that mean to us? What are some things that we learned in our first phase? We're going to take these things and begin to move forward as learning opportunities for us. You'll also see what we're doing this fall. What are we laser focused on as we go into the second phase, into the fall, and of course the spring. We still have another 2 years before 24. And so we're talking about the communication plan and how we're keeping kids abreast, how we're keeping the community as well as our constituents. And then lastly, I don't want you to take it from us. It's always good to get a grassroots, down home viewpoint from those who are most affected. We have a video we want to present to the board where you get a chance to hear from those who are really enjoying the benefits. And again, we want to thank the board for this opportunity. Next slide, and we'll pass the mic over to Peter.
Thank you, Cedric. Yes, my name is Peter Sand, and I'm a senior project manager with Findorf, and we're the construction manager on all the projects here for this referendum project across these 6 schools. And we want to give you a quick update on where the work that's happened over this summer, some of the exciting things that we're really proud of that we're able to get done this summer, and also some of the work that's going on right now that'll happen and finish over the next year or 2. So let's start with La Follette. The first couple things to show are the classroom upgrades in some of the wings that we're in. Not every classroom, these are being phased as we go along. So some of the phases happened this summer. You can see the new finishes, the new windows, improved accessibility with a new elevator that was added to this school this summer, as well as upgrades to the lighting and ceilings. Next slide. Another thing that happened this summer at the La Follette site was the renovation of the field. So this is a new synthetic turf field that was widened to accommodate soccer as well. If you look closely, you can see some yellow soccer lines and a new track with a new track surface. And also there was some of the bleachers were relocated. A study was done to note that we could save some of the bleachers and reuse the material and relocate them to a different side of the field, which was more cost effective. The third highlight I'd like to make for La Follette is the new fitness addition. Now, to you, this might look like a pile of dirt with some concrete footings, but this is the beginnings of the outline of the new part of the building that is being added onto. This is for a new 2-court gym, a weight room, and also an athletic entrance that is a separate entrance. And this will be ready for the start of the 23 and 24 school year. Moving on to the next school, Memorial. There's been, once again, significant progress inside some of the classrooms and some of the phases that happened this summer. Similar improvements to all the classrooms in these schools, but I'll repeat them. For new electrical, we're putting in new HVAC, which is heating and ventilation, in new phases as we come online, new carpeting and paint, and there's also new furniture being brought in. The second picture I have for you is the music addition that's going in at Memorial. There's a number of additions. One of them is the music addition here. And those are concrete masonry unit walls, CMU walls that are going up, and they're just starting to form the outside of the building. This will be ready this winter, January, February area in time for spring. The third area I have for the Memorial highlight is this area on the east side of the building. Right now we're grading, we're moving the dirt around, as it were. And this will be open for the late 2022, 2023 in the winter here. And this will house, this area is going to connect the building you see on the right to the main building you see on the left. It will connect to the existing remote building so that students don't need to walk outside to get to class. So this is the Fine Arts Edition. And this Fine Arts Edition will also include a corridor that connects the arts to the tech ed. It's going to be 2 stories and it'll have an elevator in there for accessibility to the tech ed and from the existing building. As we progress over to East, we did some work on the 3rd floor at East High School. This was some more classroom upgrades, but this highlights some of the science rooms that were touched in East High School. These were completely renovated and upgraded to include new casework and new flooring and new paint and light fixtures and ceiling. So a big improvement in the science rooms, and you'll see more of that in the video. Also, and this really applies to all schools, but it's great to mention it here, a lot of this work for these referendums is happening behind the scenes, work you don't see. It's above ceilings or behind walls, but it's really working to provide adequate airflow and conditioned air and more efficient light fixtures for the projects. And so while you don't see it, there's a lot of this work going on. And so East is a great example. You can see all the new piping and the boilers that are going in, and there's going to be HVAC mechanical units that are going in as well to move the air around. And that's happening over the course of the next year. So even though it's not seen, you will literally feel it as time moves on in the next coming years. The third part of East High School that I want to bring to your attention tonight is just the cafeteria addition. This is along 4th Street, and obviously you've seen the building, and if you've driven by there, you see there's a hole in the ground. What you see is the outline of the footings, and that's showing where the outline of the new building is going to be. That expands the cafeteria and gives more space. Something to note here is across all the schools, much time and effort has gone into working with the admin team and building services to put proper barriers in place to separate construction activities from student and staff activities. And so we can continue to work, and yet they can continue to learn in a safe and secure and quiet environment. This addition is projected to be completed for the fall of 2023. The next project is West High School. So at West High School, there are a number of phases going on this summer. One of them is in the center area where the art rooms and the last principal, Dr. Brand, her office and all those areas were converted to a resource and study room. You can see that here. The windows to your right look out into the courtyard, but this is a large space, houses about 90 students. New flooring, paint, ceilings, light fixtures, and also you're seeing the new furniture here allows some flexibility for the students in their study and resource time. The second picture at West High School, this is on the 1st floor on the Regent side below the gym. There was locker rooms and in an older space here, and this is the upgrade of that locker rooms. And so this is right in the middle of construction. And so right now we're even farther along than this. There's walls going up, but this is what it looked like just a couple of weeks ago as summer was ending. So there's new plumbing under the ground, new concrete CMU, concrete masonry unit walls going up. And there's going to be new lockers in this space and new flooring as well. But it's really neat to see the progress while this is going on. And so I talked about some of those barriers we put up in the schools. As students walk by, there's barriers and they say construction access. And so, like I said, separating that space, but behind that barrier, there's great work going on that's really progressing the project even during the school year. And the last picture I have for West High School is really a big overall shot. And there's a couple of reasons for this overall shot. One, you see the school. The corner at the bottom of the street is Regent and Highland there. You see the tennis courts. In the bottom corner there, in the corner between Regent and Highland, that's where the new pool and gym addition is going on. It's going to be all the way connected over to the existing building where the Stevens Gym is. And so right where there's a crane you see in the middle of the hole, that's where the new pool is going to go. And I know it's a little bit hard to imagine, but it's really great to see the progress that has happened over the course of the summer. A majority of the concrete walls are put in, and we're just getting ready to start pouring concrete slabs where you can walk on, and then some brick walls and masonry walls up the side. A couple other notes is along Regent, there is a pedestrian lane for students because the construction is leaking into the sidewalk. And so there's a construction lane that's made up of concrete barriers so the students can walk from the school across the street and get over to the Highland area or whatever they want to go to the south of that. Another thing we worked with building services on in coordinating this, if we can go back to there, is at the bottom left of this picture, you see the startings of a parking lot. So when construction started, a lot of this space where the teachers used to park is now being taken up by construction and underground utilities, and parking was going to be a huge issue. So we work with building services and the Huffman facilities team to create a space where the teachers could park. So there's over 110 parking spaces down in this area that are only used for teachers and staff. And we worked directly with Mr. Kagea and his staff on this. So it's been exciting to see how that's being implemented as the school starts. The last school I mentioned, I'll bring up before I pass it to the next individual here, is Southside Elementary down there off of Rimrock Road. On the right, you see what the building looks like now. And on the left, you see what the plan is. That's a three-dimensional model put into a picture, a rendering showing what it'll look like. But if we go to the next slide, you'll see how much progress has already been made just over the course of this summer. That's the steel that is making up the addition that's going to connect to the current building. As a note, this is a 70,000 square foot addition, which is going to now house it's now going to house Southside Elementary School. Things are changing quickly, but it's exciting to see the construction progress. With that, I'll turn the next couple slides over to Jordan Schultz, who's with Huffman Facilities Development, to talk about kind of next steps and projects that are upcoming, some lessons learned.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it. So yeah, again, I'm Jordan Schultz, Huffman Facility Development. And so we've been working very closely with Cedric and Svetlin and the entire referendum project team to implement these various projects from back from design to construction and now to move in, at least for the first phase. This sixth school that Peter was just alluding to is for the referendum project is Capitol High, also known as Hoyt. After some relocations, this project will start next month, actually, which is exciting. And then after beginning in October, it'll wrap up next summer in 2023. A few highlights for the programming here are culinary and some elevator retrofits, as well as various renovations to enable the SAIL program. If you want to flip to the next slide. So I'd like to highlight a few lessons learned through the project. This is a very brief list amongst many, but as we've especially dove into the 4 high school renovations in earnest this summer, there's been certainly a learning curve of coordination, but it's been full of celebrations and excitement as we turn the corner now to have students and staff back in the classrooms. Students have been very excited about the project. Just last week or the week before, I was at Badger Rock, which was the last slide that Peter shared. And there were students there milling about, enjoying a popsicle from the principal and asking me questions about the steel going up in front of their very eyes and clearly displaying excitement for what they can sort of a little bit envision to come. Second lesson learned here, again, back to communication and coordination. Doing so early and often regarding especially the move management is paramount. There are so many moving parts as we try to wrap up construction and then move staff and furniture, old and new, back into the classrooms, while also making sure that all the construction is done, T's are crossed, I's are dotted. our weekly meetings and coordination and safety progress meetings, et cetera, really serve to minimize surprises so that when we walk through with staff, with admin, with building services, there are minimal fires to put out. Lastly, setting expectations around construction disruption, again, including safety especially, as well as the shared vision of how we are improving the educational environment is very paramount. The project team conducts an array of safety and coordination meetings to minimize risks and provide awareness, but we also hope that it is rallying around the shared vision and that creates anticipation of all the benefits that are coming with these projects. You can go to the next slide, Alyssa, thanks. Quick look ahead here as we are in the fall of 2022 here. There is limited classroom renovation going on now at this point, of course, because students and staff are back. But there is still progress being made, of course, on the additions, and then also on non-educational spaces so that we're not disrupting. So time to work on some of the mechanical systems, boiler systems, some of the back of house areas. Secondly, a big highlight has been that we didn't yet hit just the engagement. Again, not only students asking questions, but students engaging in apprenticeships. So oftentimes we forget that students love this type of work. I mean, many of us that work in this industry grew up loving construction, and this is a perfect opportunity to on-ramp some of the very students who attend these high schools in the trades. And so youth apprenticeships offered by Findorff and some of their subcontractors absolutely should be celebrated. Lastly, we continue to monitor the construction noise because, again, different types of construction can alleviate noise and disruption to classrooms, and just being strategic around that and being sensitive to the staff needs and the student needs is paramount. I'm going to turn it over to Svetlin to talk about a few other developments.
Good evening, Svetlin Borisov with Building Services. I help Huffman and Findorff in this project. And in the summer, Building Services began the construction phase of MSCR Central. This will be the new office and programming location for Madison School and Community Recreation, with priorities on the office space in order to house the current staff at Hoyts. We are expecting to be coordinating the moves from the Hoyt building to MSCR Central in the end of this month and begin the renovations of the Hoyt building as part of the referendum 2020 in October of 2022. At MSCR West, we have awarded Iconic as the design build project, and we are making progress on finalizing the design and preparing for the construction phase. Looking ahead, we will continue to support and collaborate with MSCR and expect to open programming space for MSCR Central in the spring of 2023, and in late spring, open also MSCR West. Meanwhile, we begin the planning for a few more moves across the district. Alice will be moving in the summer in the South Side Elementary building, which we saw earlier in this presentation. And where currently Findorff is working on additions of the building as part of the project. And once Alice is moved, we will be moving the Lista building West Mundo to the Alice building. So our work will continue to be supporting our schools and doing what we need to do to keep our students in thriving learning environments. And with this, I would like to turn the presentation back over to Peter.
Thank you, Svetlin. So we've talked about the progress that we're really proud of as a collective team with Building Services and Huffman and the design team about the progress. We've talked schedule and safety. We've talked about how the phasing has occurred and how the engagement with the staff and the teachers and the principals and even the students. And so let's talk about communications, because this is really important in how all that comes together and how we communicate out all these plans and what we're doing. So Findorff is working very closely with MMSD communication, the MMSD communications team on communicating to and engaging with the staff and the students and the community through regular communications and updates. And this includes weekly school-specific construction updates, which you see an example for, this Future Ready example here. Social media posts, there's an example here where we had a youth apprentice sign up, but we do like a signing day for like a football team. It's really great. The kids love it. There's also bi-weekly updates and weekly newsletters. And we've been just starting to get some drone footage. You saw a couple pictures in this video, and we're starting to share that out as well. Some other construction communications that occur, it's not just all, hey, this is really cool and exciting, but there's also some more meat and bones, meat to it, is the back to school staff construction update. Highlighting to the staff, these are the phases that are going to be in construction while you're out. Here's how you get to your parking space. Here's where the students will come in and out of classrooms. So we are working with both the admin team and the building services on custom school specific construction communications and information to assure that the staff and the students and parents are prepared and were prepared when they started the 22-23 school year. We also provide the periodic phasing plans showing the different phases. You can see that on the upper right. For construction and safety. And we'll continue to work with MMSD and the communications team on engaging students in the best way to do that. Some of that is like I said, through social media posts. We're looking at some potential tours in the future for select classes. And we have at times in schools already shown up at some of the classes and actually gave a presentation on what's going on and getting some student interest in that as well. So the question you might be asking is, how do I stay informed? How do I find out more information about this? Well, first off, there's weekly updates that are posted on the Madison, you can see the link here, the Madison K-12 website, and those are a lot of the updates from each school. There's updates in the biweekly staff newsletter, and there's updates in the biweekly family newsletter. You can also follow MMSD on social media. There's a Twitter feed that has great information, and Facebook. And you can also subscribe to updates via the MMSD Schools mobile app, using a QR code right there. And you actually see that on some of the signs as you drive by a school like West or East or Memorial High School. There's a sign right out front with a QR code. People can quickly access that information. And now I'll turn it back over to Cedric to share some of the last parts of this presentation.
All right, thank you, Peter, Jordan, Sabetlin, Alyssa, for this here. A wonderful presentation. Now I want to give an opportunity and space, it's only about 2 more minutes, to really hear from what is the impact at the school level. To the Board of Education members, we know that we go through a lot as a team. We know you appreciate how hard the team is working. But we also want to tell you, we thank you for supporting us as well. We'll take a quick moment to listen and hear from our colleagues, constituents, principals, and students. Alyssa.
I want to first begin by thanking this community, the Board of Education, Building Services, and Findorff, been incredible partners in this work. I want to thank the Board of Education for their support, and first and foremost, the community for your generosity. What we're all seeing is, in essence, the first fruits of the referendum. And what's vitally important is that we're actually getting the students the facility that they have deserved for so long. I've heard so many positive comments from our students in regards to the brand new rooms, the floors, the ceilings, the beautiful new windows. The Board of Education got us the Promethean boards. We're very thankful for that. This facility is looking so much better, and it's giving us hope for the future.
Investing into the classrooms, I love the new spirit that it brings to us, like coming to a new school knowing that they're building it for us in a few years. Like, a lot of us want to come back to see what it'll look like. Like, it's just so many new opportunities that could come to the school, and like, it's just a new spirit, and I just love it.
There's a lot of really new things. 4 new windows, so I have 4 new windows, new walls, new lighting, new carpets. So seasonal affective disorder is a true thing, and not having windows and just being in a dark space, I can even see it in the students. It's just having that daylight come in is just so helpful.
Classrooms are a lot different. There's tables and some nice chairs. It's a lot different than the desks that we had. And then the renovated bathrooms are really nice too.
This room is really exciting to have a space that finally meets my storage needs as a physics teacher. Having desks and tables where students can hear me and see me and we can do more group work is really exciting. We're only a week in and I've already noticed a difference in classroom participation.
With the renovations, we have brand new furniture in classrooms, which is really nice to use because it's a huge improvement from what we had last year because there were a lot of different kinds of furniture scrambled all over the place. And it's nice to just have some consistency with things.
I'm really excited about the new space that we've developed here.
We've worked really well with our partners at Findorf Building Services to create a wonderful educational space for our students. The room that we're in is an example of 5 different classrooms that got renovated and completed for our students. Outside this space, we got an outside big collaboration space that's available for our students. And I'm really excited about what this opportunity presents for those students and those that are coming. And I think it's gonna bode well for all of our students and what we're doing here at Madison West.
I'm very excited that there's AC in the building now.
As we progress on this over 2-year project with the Madison School District, we're really excited to see, even at the end of the summer, the students that are starting to engage in their new spaces, their new science rooms, their new football fields, their new classrooms. And we're really excited to see the spaces that are going to be done over the next 2 years in all the schools, whether it's a renovation or addition or the new parts of the building.
All right, thank you for that. All right, a personal shout out and a thank you. I want to definitely highlight Tim Lamons and the communications team, Amy Knight and Michael Wetzel for the support of the video itself. And so with that, we'll turn it back over to Committee Chair Gomez-Smith. Any questions you might have, but thank you on behalf of the entire Building Services team.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hodo, and the whole team for this presentation and this update to the board and to the community about all the amazing things that are going on with these construction projects. And again, just to note, the fact that these are all going on the same time and the scale of this is quite impressive. And I really appreciate getting this information. All right, I see some questions we have here. Board member Vandermeulen.
Yes, I just want to say this look wonderful. You guys have done an absolutely amazing job, and I thank you on that. My only comment, which I know shouldn't be an issue, is to make sure that all the desks you can roll under in the science areas. But I think we covered that when we did the walkthrough with Cedric, and I think we got that. Otherwise, I think we're doing really well and we're on step. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Board Member Vandermeulen.
Board President Muldrow.
Yeah, so I want to say that it is beyond impressive to see the scope of these projects come to life in our high schools. I was at La Follette on the first day of school, and it was pretty apparent that there's a lot of work happening at La Follette, and also that the projects are in kind of a difficult phase for students to actually be at school at the same time. Can you talk about kind of how we transition from this construction phase to more of the finishing touches phase, particularly because there was a large emphasis when we started these projects on how we would incorporate art into the buildings. And so can you talk about how we get to that more expansive relationship with art as we see the buildings kind of enter the next chapter of construction?
Yes, excellent question, Board President Muldrow. Peter, what I actually do is come off the screen for a second, and I know that each one of these particular schools are in various phases. And Peter, if you want to share just a quick note right fast on things that we can do to share what some highlights are.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So they're all in differing phases. And right now, as we look at being a rough construction area with concrete and dirt, that will eventually turn into walls and ceilings. And then inside will start the finishes where you start painting and so on. And so currently what that will look like when we roll into that is more blank spaces that are actually canvases that the school district can work on to add things to. We are not technically adding any specific art, nor would you want us to, but creating the spaces that have the availability for the schools to add some of the great art that you see when you walk through the schools already.
Cedric, can you talk about how that will be facilitated by our team and MMSD, or who will be doing kind of that more interior decorating / art and finishing touches component of the work, since Findorf is gonna get us ready for that, but not necessarily gonna be contributing to it.
Yeah, so we do have a design team in-house as well. And so right now we're still in the first phase, which is basic construction, ceilings, walls, floors. The finished touches will come at the last stage. Think in terms of the art, the decor. We'll work closely with our curriculum team. We do have art that's stored up. We do have some new art as well. All those pieces won't come on the walls until the walls are completed, paint and everything else. And so that's the last phase of this project.
And when do we kind of get to that phase of the project, or how far out are we from kind of getting from this more construction-based space to more of the finishing touches space? And I know the different buildings are on different timelines. So I guess I would ask you to speak kind of generally when we can see projects, you know, entering that phase. Although I imagine there's going to be a range of timelines.
Yeah, I'll ask Alyssa if Alyssa want to chime in. Alyssa's our architect, and she also covers our interior design phase. And I know Peter knows the exact time schedule. If the two of you all want to just chime in right fast, just to give an update.
So as you were asking that question, I was thinking at the end of the project.
Right,
so yeah, especially the 4 comprehensive high schools, just like the massive undertaking, it is a phased situation. It'll feel like we're under construction until the end of the project. So those finishing touches are going to be coming before, you know, school year 24 starts, and then we're really going to feel kind of completed. And like there isn't still work going on in the building, but I'll let Peter elaborate. It's a little bit different for like Southside Elementary, which will be ready for next year.
Yeah. So for the 4 high schools, there, let's use an example. There, a space might be turned over so that students can be in it, and it will be a completed space in that there is air and electricity and paint and everything's final. But the finishing touches of like artwork, which is maybe different than what I consider paint and ceilings, that will probably happen near the end of all the projects as they start to look at the building as a whole and incorporate the design teams and working with building services. So we will get it up to speed, and each phase will turn over one at a time in each building as we get closer. But near the end of, I'll say the summer of 2024 is when you'll start to see the opportunity to put that in to the building as a whole for art.
Thank you so much for speaking to that. And I guess my question beyond kind of how we're moving along our timeline and the different phases of our projects, Jordan, you're kind of the first person who's emphasized the learning opportunity for our students. So our students who are particularly interested in development, who are particularly interested in construction, being able to engage in unique ways with these projects. I'm wondering if we can talk about the kind of academic benefits of that, and also how we're giving students academic credit for that and recognizing the way students are contributing to this project. And I saw Cindy jump on, Jordan, so I would say if there's a part of that question that feels like, hey, that's not necessarily my wheelhouse, she's right there, I think, and ready to chime in.
Sounds good. Yeah, Cindy, if you wanted to go first, go for it. Otherwise, I can jump in.
Jordan, you can start and I'll just wrap up in terms of how this fits into our larger youth apprenticeship, et cetera. So, but go ahead and start.
Sure. And I'll also ping Peter to speak to some of the apprenticeships. But I think the overall ambition from a very qualitative standpoint is just, hey, giving kids exposure and making sure that our staff, that Findorff staff, EUA's design team staff are available to answer questions just ad hoc, but then also making specific presentations to classrooms to say, hey, here's what we do in this professional environment, and this is what we do. This is what our role is, and allowing kids just to ask questions. When you give kids the opportunity to both see someone who's doing the work and the work they're doing, and then thirdly ask the questions, we just feel like it is a fantastic onboarding to seeing their potential for the future. But I'll let Peter speak a little bit more to the apprenticeship program.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. So on a school by school level and on a district level, we are engaging with the schools to try to get some of the students involved in the actual construction project. We've been in this community for 130 years as a construction company, and we're really passionate about construction and getting kids interested in the trades. And so just as an example, at West High School, throughout the summer, there were 2 students, CJ and Oliver, that were both working with their hard hat on and their hammer. And they were out there working all summer long and getting a taste of construction and what this is like. And maybe they choose it, maybe they don't, but it was great to see that and telling their friends about it. We're also working with the schools on a specific level to talk about how can we engage in classrooms, maybe some tech ed or some of the classrooms where teachers might be interested in a little presentation, career days and presenting a table about what it means to be in the trades and work as a mason or a laborer or an electrician, and really inform the community on what the opportunities are for the students as well.
I think I want to just comment before Cindy answers that one of the things I grew up doing in my family was, seeing construction sites or seeing roads being built or buildings being built. And my mom would always ask, do you see any women? Right? Do you see any women constructing that road or constructing that building? To this day, if I see a construction site, I look and see if there's representation in terms of different kinds of people having those opportunities and who's cast in what role, who is the electrician versus the electrical engineer, who's the architect versus the carpenter. And so thinking about it from that lens, Cindy, I think I'd like you to answer my question about kind of academics, but I'd also like you to answer the question around who is demographically getting these opportunities. And if these opportunities are disproportionately going to young people who identify as male or masculine, what are we doing to address that?
Yeah, so I will absolutely be able to answer the question. So first of all, both Jordan and Peter talked about kind of components of our experiential learning continuum, everything from like guest speakers to job shadow, all of that. So we were really excited when we started to have Findorff in our schools and EUA also to be able to use this as another opportunity to not just grow a partnership, but to really grow kind of this long-term strategy that we have. And so we met with Aaron, who is not here. I think it might have been last spring, to talk specifically about youth apprenticeship, which youth apprenticeship is an opportunity for our students to really go to the next level of coursework, right? They have to put in 450 hours of work time. So they are truly taking what they're learning in the classroom and applying it directly to the on-the-job training, if you will. Students earn credit for it. Students can also be paid for youth apprenticeship. It is definitely at the end of the experiential learning continuum. When we met specifically with Findorff, and Ali, I think this gets to it, I said that when we are taking these opportunities, we want to first and foremost see if we can identify females that are interested in this trade and in this area, because that is an underrepresented. And also our students of color, right? Sometimes our students of color, as they matriculate into the job force, are starting at the lower level paid, and we wanted to start them now so they can get those experiences. So that was one of our criteria when we worked with Findorff. We right now have, I think it is 4 or 5 students that are taking advantage of youth apprenticeship, but I want to kind of remind people of this is how like a partnership grows from like organic stages. We have recently been talking to Findorff to think about other partnerships and other job opportunities for students, because Findorff isn't just the trades, right? Findorff has opportunities in IT, and Findorff has opportunity in STEM. So we're thinking about how we take this beyond just what is happening in terms of the construction at the school level and where we can go as well. More work to do in youth apprenticeship in general in terms of how we continue to grow, but this school year, we have tripled the numbers that we have traditionally had for students in youth. I know, I see that, Board Member Nichols, yes. And we are continuing to grow in that area. We got a lot more to do, and part of that is finding business and industry that are willing to take on our young people and work with our young people. So there's a part that we can do internally as a school district, but it is critically important that we have the business and industry meet us halfway for that. And that to me, again, is where I think we have such a prime opportunity with Findorff to think outside of just this area. Hopefully that answers the question and also shows you that there's some exciting stuff on the way.
Oh, thank you so much for that response, Cindy. And thank you very much, Jordan.
All right, is that all your questions? All right, Board Member Nichols.
All right. Okay, first of all, I don't care if this is like board etiquette or not. Can I just tell you how excited Y'all doing it. Okay. Like yeah, just so much work. It is unbelievable. And I went through your PowerPoint, like, you know, in preparation for tonight, but it didn't have the same feel until you were giving it the narrative and the story and the bringing that video in. And so it's amazing to hear students and staff talking about things like classroom furniture and ceilings and walls and windows and just how that's added a sense of like vibrancy around learning. So just thank you so much for the hard work. The only question that I have is related to the Southside Elementary School. I do remember when there was a lot of input around how that school should be designed. And it was from families attending Alice, you know, families and students from the South Side. And so I'm curious, and I probably have missed this, but where can I find the kind of the architectural renderings or blueprints for how that school was decided to be designed? And I'm curious if you have if you can speak to anything tonight around what you have intentionally incorporated based on the community input phase.
Yeah, great question. Now, if Jackie, I know Jackie and Alyssa is on today. I think Jackie and Alyssa kind of tag team this approach here. Jackie, if you're on and Alyssa's on, if you want to make any quick comments, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, I can start with kind of what I know, like since we've been working with the design team on Southside, one of the places where I think the staff and student input and like the community input is really evident is in the interior design concept, which I believe we presented to the board probably before you were a board member, but I don't know if they're available publicly online. So that's something I'll have to look and see if I can find them. But it's really like this woven concept. So about like bringing like different threads of community together. So it's a really colorful scheme, but that woven concept was inspired by the input that was gathered and kind of the goals that came out of the conversations that the design team had with the community. So I think that'll be more evident in some of the interior design concepts than it will be in like the nuts and bolts floor plans, which it's going to be a great elementary school, but the concept will shine through.
I do think we also, I do think we also brought in and talked about daylighting. We have a big, beautiful skylight that's coming into the school. So, you know, allowing to connect with nature and simply just having daylight in space, I think we have, we all know it has a tremendous positive impact on students. So that is huge as well. And I do think, Alyssa, we did record a presentation of a walkthrough of the design of the building. So we could look at that and kind of dig that up and share that potentially as well.
Board Member Nichols, I can get that to you. I know we do have a 3D rendering and walkthrough. And if Jackie, if there's any updated images that can be shared, we'll certainly get that over to Dr. Jenkins and our board members.
Sure.
Thank you so much. And just as a quick follow-up to that, and I don't know that this is a question for you, Mr. Hodo, or if it's more on the instructional side, again, related to the Southside Elementary. You know, we know that you're adding on to the current Badger Rock Middle School. And so I'm curious if there will be any work over the next year about how Badger Rock students and staff begin to go through transition planning around kind of their shared identity of having an elementary school attached and what that might mean for common space in the building. Because I remember at one point there was, I don't know what happens in the design, but I know there had been conversation about kind of a shared common space. And yeah, that will be a different school experience for the elementary and the middle school students. So I don't know if anyone can address that or not, but yeah, I was just wondering how Badger Rock folks will be kind of intentionally led through a more of a transition plan as the new elementary school gets ready to open?
Yeah, very good question. To your point, we have been partnering with Associate Soups, where we'll begin to also work with curriculum side. I know there's some DLI questions around dual languages and immersion courses. I think this is absolutely critical. We're right at a stage where we're at the designs are pretty much complete, but the input stage from the community, I think, is very important. And so we'll work with the new principals over at Badger Rock, and we'll also work with the community at large to host a couple meetings along the way. And I think that feedback is important as we begin to go into the school itself. But our primary function right now was just to get the designs completed and then get it started. But the implementation stage over the next year, we have meetings scheduled on a monthly basis, and we'll wrap up those meetings even closer as we get to the 23 start time of how we can ensure that the community's input is in there. We have gardens, we have school gardens, we have a lot of logistics, you have a lot of communities coming together, and their voice needs to be heard. We totally agree with that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. My last little bad joke. I have a bad joke for Jordan. I just have to say it. Jordan, you were saying that when you were out at Badger Rock at the Southside Elementary, there were students out there who had a popsicle from the principal. I hope that popsicle fit the USDA Smart Snack guidelines. It's a joke. It's a joke. I didn't like that. Okay, forget it. I'm in rare form today. I'm done.
It was after school, Jordan.
After hours, it's okay.
Thank you, Board Member Nickel. Vice President Pearson.
Oh Lord, Michelle. So I just wanted to just say that like looking at it, I know for me, I was like, whoa, as you guys are giving up the updated photos, especially when the video and the student was just like, West High School finally has air conditioning. I think I was like, I felt that like heavy, right? So I just want to say kudos to the team for all the hard work, and then obviously for the community, because that is something that our high schools have been long overdue in upgrades and renovations. Most of us on this call a lot of us went to the high schools, and so all of us are probably like, yes, this is beautiful. So yeah. My questions were similar to Nichelle's questions, just about the Southside School and the implementation piece and how we are ensuring that the shared experience between them, and how we're going to do that. So I don't need to ask that, but I'll just one up that. For me, it's the timeline of the implementation and like the actual like feedback. So that's one of the questions, and I don't know, Cindy, if you want to talk about that. Because I know Mr. Hodo just mentioned that you guys are starting to work on that, but how are we kind of doing that simultaneously as we are completing or finishing the projects of the building pieces? And then my second question is just around how are we ensuring like the community piece? Because Rooted has been a very dear partner to Badger Rock. And is one reason, the connection between Badger Rock and the community in itself. I mean, I have a garden plot there, and a lot of us do things with Rooted, and, they are a valued community member, but how are we ensuring that they are still somehow part of the community of the new school, and with Badger Rock, and how, I know, because they also utilize heavy the space within Badger Rock. So like, how are we ensuring that they're still part of the puzzle, ensuring that it's a strong school community?
So I'm actually going to ask to see if our Associate Superintendents of Schools, Carletra, and maybe Dr. Hicks also want to come on. I know Carletra has been deeply involved in that component around community, so I think it's important for them to respond to that. Thank you.
Good evening. Yes, so we are being really intentional with the second phase of implementation for the Southside School. And so what we've been doing so far is working with the building principals. And then the next step is going to be to get some additional feedback from the community to determine the instructional focus for the school. as we move forward, as well as what that transition will look like with both Badger Rock and Alice coming over to the Southside School.
And I would also just chime in one thing, Maya, I think is just as critical. I think all three moves are critical. We can't leave out New Extramundo as well. So not only do we have to close down New Extramundo and get them moved over to Alice, I think all three are moving simultaneously. The community at Badger Rock and Southside and the rooted community are integral part of the neighborhood and the ecosystem. And so rest assured, we'll have community meetings and planning stages where we will hear their voice. But these moves, as Savetlin shared with you earlier, are going to be very critical for us over the next year. And so we're moving 3 locations simultaneously. The logistics involved in that is very, very challenging. And so we want to do this with minimal interruption to student learning, but rest assured their voice is critical and we will keep you abreast of it.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for mentioning New Extramundo, because I think that's another piece of understanding how, why the elementary school in its first place is part of why we are building it, and ensuring that happens. But yeah, I just look forward to having those conversations and just being a part of those conversations, just as a person who is in a community and not necessarily just as a board member in that space. So thank you for answering that. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Board Member Pearson. Board Member Vandermeulen, do you have another question or do you still just have your hand up from before?
No, just one quick question.
Okay.
I know West has the air conditioning on. Do all of our schools have the air conditioning on? Because I think when I was in La Follette, I know it didn't. I'm not sure if they're all on yet.
Yeah, Peter, you answer that one.
Yeah, I knew this was going to be a question here. So that student was in a new area of the building that the air conditioning was on. And so these are large buildings, all of them that will have multiple air handling units. And so as they come on in different phases, they will come on and be active in those phases. And so yes, West has 2 areas that have air handling units running. Some were previous, some are now. East has a schedule. We're working with building services and their mechanical team very closely, and with the school admin team. Those will be going on over the course of the next year for many of the phases. But by the end of summer of 2024, all the phases and all the buildings should have air conditioning on. And so right now they'll come online as they're available and as building services directs us to.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Seeing no more hands, I just have a couple of comments, and again, just echoing the appreciation for all of the work that is going on for these building projects. And just a reminder that we are at the initial beginning stages of this. We have 2 years ahead of us at our comprehensive high schools. And so I do appreciate you highlighting the lessons learned. And just as we go through space by space, the amount of movement and flexibility and changes that are going to occur for our students and for our staff, I think is important to highlight. And I just want to say that you did emphasize the communication that's going to be necessary and the amount of foreshadowing that's necessary for staff and students and community members. So I think whatever you can do to keep doing that and give people enough lead time for when changes might be necessary for these different components of the projects, that would definitely be really appreciated. I did have a chance to go over to La Follette and see some of the new classroom spaces, and the new science spaces are amazing in the collaborative movable furniture and the way that the lab stations are laid out around the room instead of how they used to be just separate from the classroom part. And so I think people are really excited about the changes that they see. And I just want to highlight that the big thing I'm hearing is just how great the bathroom difference is. So the bathrooms that have been renovated, and people have really been excited about that piece. And that was something we heard in the discussions when we started talking about renovation was how important it was going to be to update the bathroom facilities. And so that has been definitely a needed change and a welcome change. So yeah, I don't think I have any questions right now, just a suggestion that the communication and the phasing plans and the student and community engagement continues to happen. And then I guess I would just ask if there's a way that we can communicate with the alders that are connected to particular neighborhoods, just so that they have a better understanding of what's going on, so that when they are getting questions from constituents, they can have someone to go to ask the question or know more information to keep updated about what's going on.
Absolutely, excellent point. And we are aware many times our community members have specific questions that they're running through the alders. We're trying to get those answers to you as quickly as possible. So any board members running the questions around it, shoot it over to us and we'll get a response to you as quickly as possible. But yes, we'll make sure that we get them on a communication chain, Peter. If you can help me with that from Findorff, I appreciate it.
All
Definitely,
right.
Cedric.
Thank you so much. And thanks again for this presentation. No, I got it. You can see that I'm like, I'm bouncing around. I've been Dr. Jenkins tonight. I'm on Michelle's screen here as I keep getting bounced out of Zoom. Thank you again to the team for this presentation. And I think that is all the questions we have for you tonight.
All right, thank you all as well. And thank you, Dr. Jenkins and the rest of the team. We appreciate this opportunity. And on behalf of the entire building services team, we salute you all as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I'm going to let Dr. Jenkins say a few words just to wrap up.
Yeah, I just want to say beautiful presentation and thank you again to all of our board members. Thank you to our community. I hope that you're seeing that this historical referendum is beginning to really pay dividends in our community. And something we did mention tonight, and Mr. Hodo normally mentions it every time, the playgrounds just been phenomenal. That's also been added. And then I go around to the schools and just seeing our young scholars out on the playground, seeing the staff. That's a sense of excitement, not just here immediately at the school, but even after school, you see the community taking advantage of that. So I can't say anything, but thank you so much for what you're doing and continue to keep the staff informed as we move. Thank you to everyone for this presentation.
Great, thank you. And with that, we're going to move on to our last agenda item, which is just a very brief continued conversation and update on the personal electronic device policy 4403. And we talked as a board, we kind of had an in-depth discussion about this last week about the actual pieces of the policy and the context of the policy and things we might want to think about, and the process we might want to think about and who needs to be engaged in this. And we were really looking at it from a school guidance and expectations lens as the school year started. Tonight for the agenda, just the policy itself is what is attached. And just to take a look, as Nikki highlighted, and I was going to discuss this at this point, is that this policy is basically just a paragraph long, and then it has another half of a page that has 5 pieces of procedure. And so as I look at this and we talk about how we are going to approach this, you know, we talked about the fact that this is probably going to be and need to be a bottom up approach to revising this policy, where we are working with the schools to figure out what guidance and what expectations they are putting in place for students, and working with their students and their staff and their communities to define that. And then have the policy crafted so it fits that, because this policy, as we have said, was last updated in 2014. And so we don't need to spend a lot of time, again, hashing out the policy language or anything tonight, but I just wanted to bring this to you to show that this might actually be a good test case for us on where that procedure, how that procedure changes, what stays as policy, and what that language needs to be and how that fits into the guidance and rules or expectations that schools have at that level. And so does anybody, I guess, have any questions on that? We discussed this in a policy meeting that we had last Friday. Briefly, I know that Sherry is not with us tonight, but Savian, is there anything that you would like to add based on our recent conversation of this?
Not right now.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? I mean, okay, now that I'm back on Zoom, I see all your hands. But as as we go through this process-wise, what we have heard is that, and I think Dr. McGregory is on the screen here tonight. We talked about a process for engaging students and engaging families to really understand what people are thinking about when we talk about this policy and the procedures. Nikki, if it's okay, I'm going to start with Laura this time and come back around to you.
Sounds good.
Okay. Board Member Simpkin.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of thoughts. And I don't want to dive into the policy right now because I'm understanding it's not time to do that. But I think this is a really interesting example of what fits into policy and what fits into procedure. Because if we look at number 5 on procedure, which says nothing within this policy shall be construed to limit a student's ability to use a device in a manner that functions as assistive technology necessary for a student's education, and it keeps going. That would be a piece that to me is policy, because that's something that we need to anchor into the foundation of what's happening. And so I think this is just going to be a really good example, a good starting place for this type of policy work. So I think I just wanted to highlight that actually more than anything else.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out because we did have a discussion on that last week, just about making sure that that was included in when the policy got updated.
Right. So, and then the second piece, I guess I do have a little bit of a question regarding this particular policy and the fact that we're starting with a bottom-up approach and with the procedure being put into place before we get to the policy. I'm wondering, with this procedure being put into place by Dr. McCray, how does the input that we are then going to receive fit into the work that he's already done before we get to writing the policy? So I'm wondering, there's a lot of moving parts here.
No,
so how do we fit it together?
There are, and I'm not sure I personally don't have an answer for that tonight, but I think what Dr. McCray explained last week, and I don't know if he's with us tonight or not, but is that their schools wanted to get the guidance in place before they started school. So there was this urgency around getting, some procedures and guidelines in place before the school year started. And so I think, we'll have to figure out how we take what they are doing and what all of the schools, one of the things that I asked for was give us a broad overview of what all the schools are doing, like what their guidelines and their procedures are right now. And to better understand in a broad way how, 16 to 18 to 20 different schools are approaching this, and probably by elementary, middle, high school, because I think it's going to look different at the different school levels. That's my thought on that.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a very interesting process with Dr. McCray already having put so much work into creating a system. And I just want to make sure that we're honoring that work as we move forward and get feedback as well and initial input, because we didn't really have the initial input before he did that work. Right. So just wanted to say that all out loud, I guess.
Dr. Jenkins, did you have a comment on that?
McCray just popped up. I was going to speak to it for it on his behalf, but he definitely, no one can speak like Dr.
That's not necessarily true, but thank you so much. I do just want to say, I think that Board Member Simpkin just kind of lifted some of the work. Some of my sentiments would be that
And even Chris, thank you for that too. It's just that what we wanted to do was make sure that we could provide schools with an opportunity to begin to craft something to support their buildings. And I also just want to make sure that we are recognizing like that work was based upon the policy that is still in place right now. So once that policy, if it is changed, then we will do the same thing of adjusting our guidance to make sure that we are following the policy. So I just want to make sure that we're stressing that part.
And I'll just add one piece that, given that we're coming out of a pandemic when we were so much in isolation and just listening to the students, and I think Johanna last week too spoke to it very well from a student's perspective. Students want guidance, but at the same time, they want an opportunity to have their voices heard in it. And I think staff, I think everybody's really wanting the same thing here. We have to realize that we have to lean back into learning, and we have to realize that whatever we can do, and devices can't be a part of learning, and devices can be a distraction. We have to find that spot as a learning community where we're not doing something that's going to be, even if you read the old policy, wow, when you read through it again and again, it kind of sound a little strong, a little harsh to myself. So I think now we can find everyone's voice from the students, from the adults, and we will have a great policy at the end of the day that will reflect students' digital citizenship.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. Joanna?
Thank you. So I just wanted to ask a few questions. How long would you think that it would take to change the policy? I don't know if you can answer that, but I was just wondering.
I think that's yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that answer is up to us. I think we need to backwards engineer in terms of where we want to go. I think no matter what solution we come up with, it's going to have to be in conjunction with the community. When I talk to students, parents, and teachers, there are different opinions on this. And so we need to try and find some consensus and backwards engineer from where we want to be. But I certainly don't think we should rush it, so.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was just wondering. And then also, I was wondering when we would talk about this again, maybe just because I did a survey with students after the last board meeting that we have, and I have about 80 responses. I just want to share just some statistical stuff, not quotes.
Yeah, I would love for you to share that with us. I'm trying to think of the best way for you to get that to us. Maybe through we could include that in a weekly update, or and for sure the next time that we bring it back to discuss the policy itself and the content of the policy.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, thank you. All right. Nikki, I'm going to do Vice President Pearson, Board Member Nichols, and then Board Member Vandermillen.
Nikki can go before me. That's fine.
Okay, Board Member Vandermillen.
She's got her hand up the longest.
Sure. My main thing is actually to uphold what Laura said. Anything with a disability and accessible communications isn't guidance. That's someone's rights. That's someone's ability to speak. That's someone's voice. That isn't, oh, we can put that in guidance. That's an actual human right. And I think it needs to be respected as much. I would love if TJ McCray, I respect the work you did. I'd love to collaborate with it. And if you could come back also on working on the guidance so that the board can help with that, I think that'd be a real powerful statement if we could get the board, the administration, the students, and the teacher voice all as one thing. I think we can do this successfully. But the current policy we have sounds punitive as heck. That's my opinion, informal opinion. And I just think that we can honestly do the best we can for our students. But sometimes having 27 different policies doesn't work unless you have them spelled out somewhere. As long as they're spelled out somewhere and that everyone knows where to find it, then it works. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Vice President Pearson?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Nikki, for saying that last part too of your comment. I think it's important, and the first part is both your comments were super spot on. Just going back to what Johanna mentioned, just what is the timeline for us to come back to this?
I think that really depends on when we are able to do and what the student and school community engagement is going to look like. I think with the start of school and trying to figure out how it might fit in with other engagement pieces that the district is doing, I'm just not sure what that work looks like yet. And I don't think staff has had time to quite flush out how we can do that. So I don't know the answer to that question, but like Dr. McCray said, we have a policy that's in place that right now the guidance is reflecting. It's pretty basic. And you know, we could update the policy quickly if we wanted, but I don't think that's going to be in our best interest to do that. So again, the timeline is a little up in the air.
I guess, so are we envisioning and possibly having it ready for next school year, or are we like for sure? Is that like, you know, or are we thinking of maybe having it hopefully by the spring? I'm just trying to make sure that we have accountability, because I think this is an important issue. And I think Johanna having the input from students last week and continuously getting input and to continuously asking people to give input on something and then not move on it in a more like expeditiously is kind of, you know, to me is not a good move. But that's why I'm just asking of like, what are our intentions, or when do we kind of want to set the tone of how we want, or the time frame that we want. I know that there's going to be a lot of work behind the scenes, and I know that there's going to be a lot of collaboration between all stakeholders, but I think if we can give ourselves at least like a baseline of implementation by, you know, next school year or the spring, and an updated policy, I think then we can work back. It's a lot harder to work backwards if we don't even have like the final point for us to kind of work from. So that's, and I actually would like Johanna to say it, just, I actually think it's valuable to have it more than just an email or an update, but actually have her say it, because I think it's more powerful with words than in written words sometimes. So I don't know how everyone feels about that. So if that's another discussion we need to schedule or allow her the space and time to do it now, I think it is valuable for everyone to be able to see that and hear that. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, one of the options that we do have is we could try to get it in place before second semester. I mean, that's a definitive point, right? Before second semester starts at the end of January. That could be our starting point and work backward from there. So I just can't commit based on not knowing what the capacity of the staff who are going to help us with that is at this point. So, but I appreciate you pushing us forward on this, because I agree we do have to move on it. I'm gonna, just before I call on Board Member Nichols, Johanna, I guess I was under the impression you weren't ready to share that information with us tonight. Did you have information that you wanted to share tonight?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry that I made you think that. I do have the survey out and ready. So should I just share it then right now?
Yeah, I mean, if you have a bit of information that you want to share based on, what you have, the students that you have talked about.
Okay, that sounds good. So it's just from La Follette Memorial West and East. I didn't get a chance to do Capital or Shabazz. So basically 55% of the 80 students that were surveyed would like to be surveyed by the district on their thoughts relating to the district cell phone policy and like what they would want to implement. Also, these are some points that I didn't think of from the last meeting that we had. A student said that they're pregnant right now, so they use their phone to text their mom whenever they're not feeling well, or like when they have anxiety. A lot of people text their parents when they have anxiety as well. people talk to their jobs, like their managers and stuff like that. There was a few people that were saying that, like looking at the job schedules. A lot of people also agreed with the Google Classroom again, anxiety, also taking pictures of notes and due dates of different topics. Also music was a big one, but a lot of people want to have the ability to listen to music during, class, but during like optional work time, because music can help them work better. Also something that I didn't think of was some students actually use it to get out of their sensory overload, which I had never really thought of before. Some people use it for their diabetes, people use it for calculators, kill off time like after finishing their work, order food as well. I didn't think about that until the survey. So people use it to order food before like lunchtime, also just alarms, etc. And a lot of the students actually, they're fine with having a phone policy. I think that some people misinterpreted what I said the last meeting, but a lot of the students are really fine with having a phone policy. They just really want to be surveyed and have a voice in the, while making the decision, instead of it just being kind of random. A lot of students are fine with teachers making their own types of phone policies, also like just like a class by class basis, like I said before. And so that's all I want to share with you guys, just so you know, like more statistical information and some new points that I had not gotten last time or had thought of.
Thank you, Joanna. I really appreciate you sharing that information, and for you continuing to engage students from all over the district in this conversation, because I think that's what all of us are going to have to continue to do, and find a way to do it at a large scale like you were trying to do. So I really appreciate that. Board Member Nichols.
Great. Thank you, Joanna, for taking the time to do that, like just within a week, and then being able to bring that back. So much appreciation. So I know we're not deep diving into the policy tonight, but there are, I guess, two things that I do want to lean into. In the paragraph of the main policy, not the procedure part, it says that students are permitted to possess a cellular phone, a digital assistant, personal device, et cetera, provided that students refrain from using devices, one, in a manner that distracts from and or disrupts the learning of oneself or others. And I feel like that one sentence, disrupt, goes back to our behavior education plan, because the behavior education plan has responses for what is considered disruptive and uncooperative behavior. And to the extent that a student having a cell phone in their possession and they're interacting with that device then becomes seen as disruptive or is disruptive. I think what I would like to get clear about is how are teachers generally responding to this kind of disruption? Because in the behavior education plan, it can be anywhere from a level, I think like 1, 2, or 3. And yeah, like I would be curious about us learning more about that, because I feel like that has been the complaint I've heard a lot about from parents and staff, that they're distracting and disruptive. And so to me, if you're going to make a policy, in my opinion, more objective and or enforceable, it feels to me like we would do better to try to at least try to define what we mean by that. Because otherwise, I feel like there's a lot of like subjectivity or interpretation, like what may be disruptive to this teacher may not be disruptive to another teacher who has like a certain way of like having a cell phone check-in process or, something like that. So to me, I don't have specific language. I just think it's something that we should be paying attention to, like when we're using words that could be interpreted by people in a variety of ways. And if there is a connection back to the behavior education plan, I'd be curious to see if we have any behavior data right now. I don't know if we do, for students being, kind of coded at a certain level for references to cell phone use or refusing to give up cell phones or, whatever the case may be. So that's just kind of where I was leaning in. And I think the last point that I would make about this, about our cell phone policy is that what I understood from last week with the day away is that that's guidance that schools can use as a resource, and they can kind of adjust it based on, I think, what fits their school community best. I think that's good. I also think that can be challenging from a policy perspective, because the policy then isn't kind of uniformly expected across our campuses. So yeah, I'm saying all that to say I actually think it's good if we were listening to more students, actually like surveying and talking to staff as well, and getting parents and caregivers in on this conversation to help at least inform a little bit more about how people are using kind of words around the policy, like disrupt, distract, those kinds of things. I think it would do us well to have a better understanding of how people are interpreting the policy.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Did you,
That was it. Thank
Okay.
you.
No, I agree with you. I just wanna, before I call on Board Member Castro, I just wanna point out that Johanna gave us a whole list of what students say that they use their cell phones for.
Yeah.
And what students feel is a very necessary way. And it has, the way that students use cell phones has changed so much since this language was written around this policy in 2014. So I think trying to tease that out and figure out how to manage that in actual policy language and practice is going to be the challenge, right? Yeah. So I appreciate that. Board Member Castro.
Yeah, I guess I
Close
should
us out.
clarify myself a little bit further in that. I think the end goal that we want to backward engineer from is where classrooms are engaging learning spaces. And so I think we have to take a look at the root cause. Cell phones are not the primary issue, they're the secondary issue to me. They are a symptom of an issue of, for whatever reason, folks tuning out if that's the issue. We just heard that students do use cell phones for a variety of very important reasons. And so I think we need to have a larger conversation about classroom communities and relationships with students, and acknowledge the fact that this is very contextual and depending on interpretation. Someone may appear to be distracted by their phone, but they're doing something else. And so I think we have to keep that nuance in mind when we're looking at policy. And ultimately, it's about what happens in the classroom, and the best we can hope for is that our policy reaches down through practice.
All right, thank you. Joanna, I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just like to agree with both of the board members before me, just because I do agree about the subjectivity of a policy with words. I noticed that this year some staff interpreted phones being a distraction completely differently than another staff member. Some teachers will interpret it as you being on your phone equals a distraction, but another teacher may ask you what's going on, what's happening, why are you using their phone, and not interpret it as a distraction. So there is a lot of subjectivity that when we work on the policy, it has to be kind of taken down to a minimum if possible. I also agree with getting the student voices, since in 2014, I feel like phones didn't have as many, they definitely didn't have as many functions as they have now. And now you can do almost anything on your phone. So that's like a big, I guess, difference between 2014 and now. I'm just really excited to work with you all in the district on getting student voices and staff voices, implemented to the new policy. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Board Member Vandermeulen.
Just one question. Is there a way that we can stress to the schools currently that the disability portion is not guidance, that it's required? Because I don't want someone taking someone's voice box. I really don't. And if they're going to have to go through the policy, the guidance to find it, whether or not you're going to have somebody take someone's AAC device or someone who are using it for a disability, and it's going to be problematic. Is there a way we could just stress that until the policy catches up with this does not include devices used for approved for disability use by the school?
Yeah, and I think that's the way it's already written, Nikki. So it's already written into the procedure part that is already part of the policy that says that they can be used for assistive technology needs. And so I just want to clarify, from my perspective, that is not the intent of this policy at all, is to take away anybody's technology that they need for, assistive reasons or, that part of their disability requires. And so I'll turn that over to Dr. Jenkins to speak to that, but I think that's already covered in the way the policy is written. And I think that's just a piece we don't want to lose as we rewrite it.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. It's there. I think it's number 5 when it talks about a student with an IEP. I'll let Nikki, but one of the things that you live, I think that now it's really about human decency. And even with our student talked about the relationship and Castro, it's about relationships too. This year we're pushing in on meaning how we connect with one another. And it's not to look at someone as if though they're doing something wrong, but to ask what's going on with a student. I think we're going to continue to push that, whatever policy we come up with, as long as we're lifting the voices of one another and seeing one another as human beings, I think it's going to work. But what we're really trying to get at, as I would say again, Board Member Castro, you're saying it's secondary, really. It's cell phone. What's the real issues? And I don't want to say that we have any policy that increases disproportionalities based upon the real issue of how we may have certain attitudes about different students and different beliefs. So whatever we come up with, it should be rooted deeply in everyone's voice, the human decency, and it should play out as such. So it increases our ability to have learning going on. And disruption can go both ways. A student can disrupt and a staff person can disrupt as well. And if I am sitting here and I have some various conditions and I'm using a device as my support, and if you come at me incorrectly without knowing what's going on with me, that can be disruptive. But students too know that they can have music on, it can be disruptive, it can be loud, but it's about having a shared community where we have respect for one another and say that I'm not going to be disruptive one way or the other. So that's where I am with it. It's about human decency.
All right, so more on that to come. So I appreciate the conversation on this, and we will continue to work and give the board an update as we have more information on that process piece.
So can I just ask a clarifying question? This is kind of going back to the timeline. So since it sounds like we do value getting additional input, is there somebody on staff, Dr. Jenkins, who is like leading kind of the listening part or the gathering part that might come back to us? Or I mean, I know I hate to even ask that. I'm just wondering like what the timeline is for either the surveys or the listening, or have we not gotten that far yet?
I don't think we've gotten that far yet. I think we're talking about it. I think the sense of urgency needs to be there, but I think at the same time, if we're going to do it well, I think we need to be intentional in getting the voices. And what kind of voice do we want? We want quality to be able to really reach out to all of our students and our staff and have a real deeper, it's a deep conversation about this that can lead to some other greater good. And I don't want to rush it and cause us not to get to where we really want to go because we're rushing it. Maybe we'd sit back and let's have some additional discussion with ourselves and then think about it. The schools went out with this year's guidance around a policy that was developed in 2014, I think it was. And so I think their initial guidance, what we are talking to them about making sure that this year we are about connections and not trying to harm students in ways, but we still need the students' voice, parents' voice, like was said earlier, everything that was said earlier, I totally agree with that. And I think we can have a target. If you want to say second semester and work backwards and see where we are, but I think it needs to be fluid enough. If we're not there, don't try to force it. And if we are there, then why not second semester? I heard someone say that, bring that up as a natural place. But if we're not there, don't try to rush it though. There's a lot to be learned on this topic, really is.
Okay, thank you for that.
One more thought. All right. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, I'm sorry. Board Member Pearson, did you have a question?
Second motion to adjourn.
Great. Second from Board Member Pearson. All those in favor? Oh, Joanna, your advisory vote.
Oh, yeah.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
I don't want to get another week.